But I really urge my clients to think anytime their mom, let's just in this example, says something like, what are you going to do if nobody buys it? Instead of feeling like, yeah, what am I going to do if nobody buys it? That they say, she's just coming from a place of protection.
You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. Downloadable audio episodes can be found on the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Today, we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Jamie Gale, the owner of Jamie Gale LLC. And today on this podcast, we're talking podcasts. So, Jamie, how is it going today?
It's going awesome. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. So tell us, just to lay a foundation here, what is Jamie Gale LLC?
Yeah, so Jamie Gale LLC is my company. I own a program agency, and through that, I develop and operate programs in two main areas. One is for kids and families. So I own a kids yoga company. I co-direct a summer day camp and after-school enrichment program. I have trainings for educators. And then the other section of my programs is for business leaders and entrepreneurs. So I have a podcast network, and we host personal and professional development podcasts. And then I run a program for moms that want to start and grow businesses, to helping them, just get their business off the ground, creating connection groups between them and offering help in that way.
Nice. So how long has this been going on?
Yeah, so I started my company in 2013, so a little over 11 years.
That's been a little while.
Yeah, it's evolved over the years, but started it then.
And was the podcast thing always part of it, even back then?
No, the podcast thing is newer to my company, and it's a perfect complement to all the other things that I'm doing. It's been such a great way to start getting the word out about things and make the connections. But no, it's newer it's one of my most recent programs.
All right. So let's start with the first vertical that you were talking about with the
Yeah.
kids and all that
Yeah.
jazz. Tell me, was that what initially started?
Yeah. Well, so the program that I initially started was a kids yoga company. I have a background in education. And at the time when I started the business, I had 3 little kids, and I was looking for something to do with my mind. And I loved being home with them, but I really wanted something that could allow me to teach again, because I had come from an education background. And so I started a kids yoga company. But then I knew that I also wanted to serve the parents in a way as well. And so my company had the kids yoga programs, but also opportunities for families to connect, moms to connect. And so that was kind of where things started. And then everything has evolved from there.
All right. Let's back up a step from
Yeah.
before you started your business.
Yeah.
What made you decide to go off on your own?
So I had excuse me, I had a background in teaching all different ages. And so I loved working with especially little kids. I also had a background in teaching high schoolers, and I had a background in camps. And so I had worked at summer day camps I was a summer day camper, and then worked at camps until I became a mom. So I was working at camps and teaching preschool and also some high school education things. And then when I became a mom, I knew, I was teaching preschool for a nonprofit organization. So I had an infant. Money wise, it didn't make sense for me to go back to teaching in that way. And so I took a job as a marketing and management coordinator for a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
And I was a new mom with a 5-month-old baby, and they had this part-time from home opportunity, which I was really excited about. In college, I got a certificate in business, and I just really have a mindset that I'll figure whatever it is out. And so this opportunity came up. They handed me a recreational campus that had a camp and a pool and a big building and 50 acres of land. And they said to me, okay, we just need someone to first run this facility and make it, all the things that happen, coordinate everything. And then they said, and make it make money.
Oh,
and so
no big deal, right?
No big deal, right? So here I am. I was this, and this, it's a nonprofit. They have this board of directors. And so here I am, super young. I was 24 years old. And I'm going into these board meetings with these men in business suits at 8 a.m., and I'm I'm learning as I'm going. I learned so incredibly much in that role. I absolutely loved that work. I had that job for many years. It was really, really wonderful. It taught me so much about everything. It hit my nerdy parts of my brain that I love to do. It kept me in touch with adults at a time when I was with a lot of babies, because I then went and had 2 more kids over the next few years.
Nice.
And so that really taught me that you can take something that is just an idea and make something lucrative from it. So then I had the 2 more kids, this from home part-time thing didn't make sense in my life anymore. When I was with the kids, I knew that I was needed to make a change. And so for a couple years, I stayed home with my kids, but I was itching the whole entire time to figure out, like, what is my next thing? And I knew that I was ready. I just like had this pull to create something. I had a pull to go off on my own, but it was more just a pull to create something. And so I decided that I wanted to blend the things that I loved. I loved working with children, and I had this sort of eager business itch to scratch. And so I knew I didn't want to just go, and yoga at that time had made a really big impact in my life for all of the reasons. And so when I decided I wanted to do some teaching, and especially in kids yoga, because that fit into my life at that time as well, I knew I didn't want to just go get a job at a studio. I knew that I wanted to create something. So right from the get-go, I worked to create a brand, launch a company, and I just sort of announced I own a new business and this is what it's going
Ha.
to do. And kind of that's how it started. So it was a blend of my background, but then also that like great fun desire to take something and make it make sense, make it make money, and make it grow.
Nice. So the yoga studio at the time, did you have your own building or place, or how did
So
that
we
work?
were a mobile program because with kids, you got to go to where they are. So it was just me for the first year teaching, and I would go into schools and libraries and community centers.
Oh,
I would
okay.
contract with yoga studios if they wanted to add kids yoga to their programming. And then the same when I started to add instructors the next year, which was its own whole adventure. But I we were all mobile. So I would give each of our instructors, a set of mats, bins of supplies, and we would just plan our curriculum and go wherever there are kids. And so that is my program is still mobile to this day, and always will be because of that. It's much easier to go to the kids than have parents have to bring their kids to us.
All right. Tell me about kids yoga, because
Yeah.
I've done yoga a handful of times, and only a handful because I feel like I'm the only guy that, well, one, the
Hey.
only guy, and two, I would say nowhere near flexible. So
Okay.
I feel like I'm outgunned here.
Okay.
Unless you're doing that, is it Shavasana where they put the little
Yeah.
bag and you
Okay.
sleep and stuff like that, or
Yeah.
relax? I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, if that was an
Yeah.
hour, I'd do that. But
Yeah.
anyways, with kids, they probably have the attention span that's even shorter than mine.
Yeah.
So how do you do yoga with kids?
Okay, so first you're going to get my little talk about you don't need to be flexible to do yoga. You get flexible by doing yoga. So
Fair,
that is
fair.
my elevator pitch on that. So kids yoga is a very playful, very fun, interactive experience. Sometimes when people think about kids yoga, they expect to see kids in rows on mats, quiet, and
They do?
that is not at all what it's like. We are on and off our mats, we are making noise, we are singing songs. Obviously it depends on the age of the kids, but really the goal of kids yoga is to teach kids that they can feel better by moving their body and by learning to tap into their breathing, and then also that they have the power to start to settle their minds. And so all of the games that we do, all of the songs, the adventures, we tie in books, we have lots and lots of toys and props and everything like that. It's all to bring that sort of awareness to them. And sometimes it looks like the same poses that adults do. We have this, but the goal is really that they know that by doing these things, moving their body in these ways, that they can feel good, so that they keep coming back to it and that they keep building their toolbox. Because, right, like if we had learned these things when we were kids, we
Oh
would have
yeah.
been able to handle things so much better, and feel way more tapped into the idea that I don't feel good. Why am I not feeling good in my body right now? Why am I upset? What can I do about it? And then actually having the tools to help with that. So that's what kids yoga is. You know, at a young age, it's lots of stuffed animals and stories and games and songs. And then in the school age, we try to tap into things that they're excited to learn about and play games that otherwise wouldn't include yoga. We bring yoga into different games like tic-tac-toe. They become the X's and the O's, right? And they can make
Oh,
and we tape it on the ground. And anyway, so it's really fun. And then when we get into the tween age, they can really start to build on those skills. It starts to look a little bit more like adult yoga, but we still make it playful because they're still kids. So
all
yeah,
right,
yeah,
fair. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. It's cool. It's
So
great.
tell me why did you choose to go off on your own versus just becoming a teacher at some place that was already offering something like this?
It's interesting because I think some people working for another place is a great answer. Like it's a really great fit. They want the candy of teaching without all of the legwork of creating a business, right? And that fits really, really well for some people in their lives and their personalities, everything like that. I have never been that kind of person. I've always had my own ideas of how things should go. I enjoy the nerdy behind the scenes process of doing all of the back end things. And so it was just honestly like I said, scratch that itch for myself. I enjoy those pieces. At the time, I wasn't thinking about the possibilities that come from doing it on my own. I just knew that that fit my personality and my lifestyle. I had 3 little kids. I wanted to have autonomy over my schedule and my schedule, what fit in my life. I wanted to be able to ramp it up and ramp it down depending on what was going on in my life. And so that really fit really well for me. I'm so glad that I did do it that way because it has allowed me to evolve so much over the years, add tons of new programming, make, you know, the ceiling is much, much higher when you are doing it on your own. And so I'm really glad I did. I just wish that I could say I had that foresight before, but no, it was just the what felt best to me at the time.
Sure, fair.
Yeah.
So you're married at the time then, right?
Yep.
So
Hmm.
how did that conversation go with your spouse? And you're like, hey, funny story. I'm gonna start a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. So he did know that I was itching for my next thing. And when we had our kids, he was doing graduate school. And so my little part-time job that I had been doing, it already was a part of our lives and it was what was supporting us at the time. And so he was supportive of me in that way for sure.
All right.
And then, that it is just in my personality to like start things and do things. So it wasn't, and honestly, I was already working so much at that other job that I was going way
Oh,
above my hours. So this was just my natural next project. I'm a project kind of girl. So whether it was like starting a business or, our first home or having a baby or whatever it was, it just sort of fit my personality. And I still was I knew that I needed to continue to make it fit in our lives. So that looked like me only teaching when I had childcare. He was very busy with his schooling. And so, if I was going to teach, I had to make sure that my kids had coverage, whether they were in preschool or whatever it was, or a babysitter, and then the rest of the business and things, nap time and nighttime, like
ah,
so we just kind of made it work in that way.
nice. Nap time and nighttime. I like that. That's clever.
Yeah.
So tell me, you grow this thing, you start
Yeah.
adding employees.
Yeah.
Now you're trying to hire people that you trust with other people's kids
Yeah.
to teach them yoga
Yeah.
and not go crazy doing it,
Yeah.
which I can imagine to me, that sounds like when you hear about the trapeze bartenders in Las Vegas. I always think, how do you hire for that job?
Oh, yeah. Right. Right.
So
Right.
it's the
Yeah.
same thing with trying to
Yeah.
find a yoga teacher that's cool with kids
Yeah.
and kids being kids. How do you find someone like that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for the yoga part, I was able to contract with people. So they were not employees of mine, but they were contractors of my company. Um, the employees have come later with other programs and just the business end things. So the thing I always say is that I need them to know kids before, like I needed to know that I need to prioritize them being really excellent with children And before, you can find people who are the great at yoga, know every single pose and every single whatever, but if they don't know how to take a room full of kids and
Mm.
manage it from a behavior standpoint, manage it from an energy standpoint, and then make it fun, we're out of luck. So I knew that I needed to work with educators, people who've had experience at camps, and I got really, really lucky. I mean, every single part of my business has grown because I have tried something in a small way that has worked and then I've grown it. So when I first started, the reason that I even brought people onto my team is that I had got a request from a camp to come in that next summer. So I started my business in spring of 2013. In spring of 2014, I got an ask from a camp to come every single morning for 2 hours to their camp to work with all of their campers for the kids yoga. And like I said, I had 3 little kids at the time. That it wasn't a yes for me. I didn't really want to be gone that much. I had other teaching gigs I'd already gotten for the summer. And so I was talking to someone and I said, I guess I have to turn this really amazing opportunity down. It's a big contract. And they said, well, why don't you just have someone teach for you, my gut was like, no, that's its own whole thing. But I got really, really lucky. I knew 2 people that had children, they had been educators, and they had a good foundation in yoga. And so I went to them with this like crazy idea, and I figured, all right, it's a 10-week contract. We can give it a go. My mind does think in systems. So I immediately was like, okay, here's this. I knew the framework of how I needed to get them the ideas, the content ideas and the supplies and all of that. And I thought, like, what is the worst that can happen? This doesn't work really well. It's a 10-week contract. If I don't enjoy this, if they don't enjoy it, if the school is not happy that it wasn't me because I had previously taught there, I won't do it again. And so it was such a small way to test it. And it went like amazing. The school was thrilled with it. The 2 of them were so happy to have this opportunity to, make a little bit of money and also get the teaching, the candy of teaching. It was fun. It's a playful job. And it was like, okay, that went really great. And so then from there, it just dominoed and my team grew very rapidly. And then that expanded the opportunities to like bring more yoga to kids. It obviously shifted my work because I went from mostly teaching and then running the business and for my classes to now managing, 15 teachers that were going all year
15.
round. Yeah, I think my team was like 15 to 18 at one time. It scaled back as my focus has changed and I now have other programs, but it was for several years, it was growing really, really quickly. And so that changes my work as the business owner a lot, but
Yeah, you're
I
shifting
loved
over
it.
to more
Yeah.
manager leader.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. So that's how it was. Just I trusted my gut. I took a risk in a small way, knew I could pivot if I needed to, and went from there. So yeah.
Nice. So when you add the first person, it goes well. I imagine you were slowly adding people.
Yeah.
How were you marketing to help with the growth?
That's a great question. So I have put almost no money into marketing my business over the years. It has grown very organically, which I feel incredibly lucky about. I was using this Facebook and Instagram, what Instagram I added later because that wasn't really a thing at first, but and just advertising it that way, word of mouth. When I first started, I announced my company and I said, I'm doing this now and I'm giving away 6 classes to local preschools for a free class, and who can connect me? At that time, my target, like my friends, my personal contacts were right in that demographic of kids with parents of young kids. And I have had like 10 or 12. I wasn't really just doing 6. I would do as many as I could. And that just sort of snowballed from there. And so, yeah, just showing what we're doing, like I said, with the kids yoga and in all my other programs too, a lot of times it's not exactly clear to someone who's not in it what the idea is behind it, but just trying to take pictures, get photo releases, take pictures, share those out, ask for refer people to send the message out. And it really was very organic and everything has just sort of grown. I've gotten
No,
really
that's
lucky.
awesome.
So
That's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah,
So when did you decide to shift gears and add the whole
yeah.
tier 2?
So great question. So At the very beginning of this conversation, I mentioned that I was also supporting the families, the moms
Yeah.
and so my events already sort of were twofold. I had the events for the kids, and then I had when kids weren't in the room, and those meetings, those events that I was putting on for the moms, the families, the adults, I guess I should say, those were really about personal development. And so a few years into my business, couple years into my business, I was talking with some moms that had attended those events who also are bringing their kids to my kids programming, and they owned their own businesses as well. And so we started really talking about sort of the unique challenges of being a mom and a business owner at the same time, and growing your business and growing your family at the same time. And they were like, oh, I wish we had a place to like talk about this. I wish we had a place to learn together. And I was like, well, you said the magic words. And so I created my personal and professional development group for moms that own businesses. I've just morphed that sort of grown up part of my business that I had been doing, and narrowed it down just from moms and parents in general to business owning moms. And so that sort of was right from the beginning a part of it, but I really formalized it. I created a brand, put applications out for people to join the groups in 2015. And so that is still growing and thriving from there. And so that naturally, and then when you do something, people say, oh, how did you do it? And so then my mentorships were born from that. And the podcast network was a natural extension of that, because I had some of the members of my groups that were thinking about adding a podcast to their companies. And again, I will figure anything out. I will learn, I will teach myself, I will figure pretty much anything out. And that was how the podcasts were born. So it's just the podcast network was born. I was like, okay, well, I actually didn't even intend to host my own podcast. I just intended to create the platform for other entrepreneurs' podcasts. But then I got the bug and
Once
I
it
added
bites,
some of my own. Yeah. But so I was like, well, I'm going to do this similar to how when I started my kids yoga company, how I immediately knew I wanted to create a platform for it. I didn't just want to go teach. I was like, well, I'm not just going to help them start their podcasts. I'm going to create a podcast network. And so it started with a Google search. How do you create a podcast network? And then I taught myself everything from there. I thought I would not enjoy the production end. I actually love the production end. I love the editing. I love all the pieces of it. It's been such an enriching addition to my business. But it really it's like every step has led to the next step. There has been no hard pivots. It's all been just a natural growth and extension from the last decision, the last test run of something. So
nice.
yeah.
I'm stuck here because you said that you love the editing, and I think you're the
Ah,
first person I've ever heard say that.
yeah.
Ever.
I find it like people who knit must feel. I don't knit, but I
I don't
imagine that
either.
it's like that,
All right.
that you disappear into this world of words. And I always have loved the writing piece of things. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say the writing, but the words aspect of things. I am the go-to person when someone's like, hey, I need to word this text message, or I need to write this letter to, this email to, it's hard conversation email to somebody, or how should I phrase this? That's always been my like nerdy pursuit.
All
And
right.
so,
Well, that's cool.
yeah, I toyed with going to law school because I love words so much. But it's just, I find that you just like disappear, and you can it's also really an interesting practice because all you can do is remove. So it's like really interesting to create like a cohesive sentence or phrase or paragraph or section or podcast just by removing words or sentences. And I don't know,
All right. You're
I
like
like put on my
Michelangelo with
headphones
David,
and
right?
what'd you say?
Like Michelangelo with David,
Yeah,
right?
I
You can
guess.
remove
I guess.
stone, but
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
get to add.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So me, Michelangelo. Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah. Yeah.
Tell me, let's talk more into the mom business owners and going into that road.
Yeah.
Did you get certifications, or did you just say, hey, I'm super awesome because I've experienced it? Or how did you get people to trust in you, to
Yeah.
feel trust, I guess enough trust to give you money and their time for
Yeah.
you to help them out?
So I did take some certifications to learn to lead the groups. I think that it's just like just like with the kids yoga, you can know yoga, but until you know how to like actually facilitate the class, similar with that. So I learned from other experts who have done it, and I got some certifications in that. And then in any area that I'm teaching, I make sure that I'm well trained. And so if there's a specific topic that I'm like teaching on, I will go and actually formally learn about it. But the interesting thing about the groups is specifically for the networks that meet together for my company, it isn't that I am the expert and I have all the answers. All have answers. We're all walking the walk of being a mom and a business owner, everybody who's in there. And so I more just create the space. I use those facilitation skills that I learned and have practiced over many years of leading groups of all kinds. And I create, we pick a topic. Every one of our meetings has a very specific topic, and I'll present some things that I just found, I did some research, but it's a collective wisdom type of environment. And so everybody has valuable experience. So I more just facilitate the opportunity to gather and connect and learn together. And then inevitably everybody contributes. We have like a system for how that is, so that it's not just one person talking. Everybody contributes to it and shares what they know or think. And so that is what's really beautiful about that connection. It's not like a webinar where you just listen. We are all contributing to it. So that works out really well. And then the business mentorship piece of that, the thing about having started many, many, many brands and businesses over the years is that I know my system. And so I am very clear that I'm teaching them the systems that I use. And I'm very clear about what am I and what am I not? I'm not a lawyer, not an accountant, so I think that's really important, is just knowing your scope of practice, being really clear about what that is. And then, people want to learn from someone who has done it before. And so
Right.
that works. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
So I've done quite a few podcast interviews, and I started to notice patterns that I didn't
Okay.
even know existed. So amongst business owners,
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, and stuff like that. So I imagine when you're meeting with a lot of these moms, entrepreneurs, you're starting to see patterns
Oh,
that may
yeah.
be surprising. So what are some of those patterns that you saw
That's a
that you're
great
like,
question.
what in the world? I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, one is a little bit on the softer side. It's a little like less hard businessy, but is an
All right, that's
interesting,
fine. Safe
yeah.
place.
Okay. So one thing that I have learned to ask my clients right up front in one of our first meetings is that I ask them to do an assessment of circumstances. And you could look at time, money, knowledge, skills, all of those things. But the one that I have added in there is the one they avoid actually doing, is the support. And
Oh,
it's interesting that you asked me at the beginning about how my now ex-husband felt about me starting a business, because that piece of who are the voices in your head, it so impacts how a new business owner is going to feel about progressing in their process. And so there comes to be a sticking point, talking about patterns, after the framework is built. The website is done, the LLC is formed, the logo is designed, all of that. And then before they actually launch, where they freak out and and they get nervous, or like, oh, I don't know, like, who am I to do this? Like, who am I to think that I'm going to just say I own a business publicly and loudly and promote it? And I find that it really comes down to the messaging that they're hearing from their inner circle. And so I asked them before we get to that point to figure out who are going to be the cheerleaders. When you show them the logo, who's the one that's going to be like, that is so awesome. Have you thought about adding this or this? Because I think it could be so, not that they're yes men, that they can give constructive criticism or constructive feedback, but because they want you to move forward. And then who are the people in your life who usually are the ones who love you the most? That it's coming from a place of wanting to protect you from failure, from embarrassment, from whatever it is, that are going to be the ones that are going to ask, like, well, are you sure that you don't need another training? Or like, I don't know, do you have time to do this? Or what
oh,
are you going to do if nobody buys it? What are you going to do if nobody signs up? And I've noticed that when new business owners take a few minutes before that freak out moment before launch to identify who are the people, who are the voices, then they can put a filter on those voices when they, and so that they can say, oh, okay, a lot of times it's, especially with my clients that as young women, that it's their moms a lot of times that are
Oh,
coming from a place of love and protection. They don't want their daughters to fail at this business while they're also taking care of their kids and everything like that. But I really urge my clients to think anytime their mom, let's just in this example, says something like, what are you going to do if nobody buys it? Instead of feeling like, yeah, what am I going to do if nobody buys it? That they say, she's just coming from a place of protection. And so having that conversation up front it kind of averts that pattern sometimes. So that's one of them that I think is really, really, really common,
oh my
and
gosh, that's
so yeah,
incredibly insightful.
yeah.
It's incredibly insightful because I can tell you when I started my first business, I did not confer with my wife.
Ah,
And I didn't, to me, I was in a job that was paying next to nothing. So to me, the risk was negligible because I thought if this doesn't work, I can just get another job anywhere. I'm a
yeah,
smart enough guy that I can
right.
figure it out. You can always figure it out. And from her perspective, she's more security based.
Mhm.
So I left a job kind of thing.
Yep,
Was she's like, where's the next check gonna come from kind of thing.
right.
And so it was interesting. I didn't find this out until years later, that it didn't even dawn on me to ask her, like, hey, is it cool if I start a business? Or what would you think if I started a business? Didn't even dawn on me. I just treated it like I'm going to run to the grocery store, like this is
Ah,
happening
okay.
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, realistically, she's right. She was treating it more like we're moving houses or something bigger than
Ah,
just running
yep.
to the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's just like, there's no big deal. We're just starting a
Right,
business.
right,
What's the big
right.
deal?
Yeah.
I shouldn't even say we are starting a business. I am starting a business. And we have a house. At the time, we didn't have any children at the time. So I'm like, this is no
Mm-hmm.
big deal. This is something I want to do, something I'm gonna do. I'll make
Mm-hmm.
money.
Mm-hmm.
It's no big deal. And it was very interesting to get her perspective. I didn't get that perspective until I think it was 8 years later, 8.5 years
Wow.
later.
Wow.
And I was like, wait, what? I
Wow.
didn't even
So what did
realize.
she
I mean, I'm
say?
such a moron.
So what did she say? When
So,
you
well,
when you
there's a little
started
bit of
it?
backstory. There's a
Yeah.
little bit of backstory. So, I sell that business
Okay.
just shy of 8 years after I started it. And so I get a little bit of cash and I get a little bit of time. And so I decided to write a book, right? I know
Ah.
everything, right? So, uh, actually, it's a good book. So kudos there. But, anyways, I had some time. So I'm writing this book, but I had contributors in the book. So I had other business owners give me their little blurb about starting and all that kind of stuff. I had a guy talk about credit card processing. And I thought, hey, it'd be cool to have my wife give a little blurb about being married to an entrepreneur. And she kept kicking the can down the road, like, hey, I haven't gotten to it. I haven't gotten to it kind of thing. And I'm like, I've gotten 15 other people to write a paragraph, right? Busy entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Why is my wife, who's a teacher, so this was during the summer,
Mm-hmm.
she's got summers off, right? Like, you couldn't find 5 minutes to write a paragraph for your husband's book, right? So, anyways, I forget how the conversation went. It was probably about the 50th time that I asked her, and I said something like, if you don't want to be in the book, just let me know,
Yeah.
right? And she's like, it's not that. And then she gives me this thing that she actually wrote, and it was essentially saying that I didn't confer with her
Uh,
about starting a business. And it was one of those where I'm looking at it going like, did I? I'm like, no, she's right. I didn't,
mm,
wasn't even dinner conversation.
mm,
It was one of those like, hey, I quit my job. I'm starting a business kind of thing. It wasn't an ask. It wasn't a presentation. It was
yeah.
just like, hey, look at the clouds. Pretty cool, huh? Next topic. And
Well, that's a new one. That's a new one. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
it really put it in perspective because I guess from my point of view,
Mhm.
I didn't know that I needed support.
Mhm,
I was so focused on just getting it done
mhm.
that I felt like you're just like a freight train, right? We're just like, this is happening and I'm the one to make it happen. And I forgot that there's like trains need support, right? There's track and
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that. If you want to run with that analogy, I should have conferred with her, or at least got her thoughts on it, regardless of if I started or not, based on her thoughts. I learned even after that fact that she has zero interest in me starting a business. So it's probably, I mean, you could argue pretty strongly that it's a good thing I didn't ask her,
Okay.
but it was interesting, her perspective. It was interesting to learn from her late that I didn't,
Hmm.
I mean, that I was a jerk. I didn't mean to be a jerk,
Yeah.
but I just, it's kind of one of those things like by
Yeah.
not saying something or even valuing her feelings, I didn't value anyone's feelings in regards to starting a
Mm.
business. I kind of treated it like the way I imagine stand-up comics do. When you're new and you want to be a stand-up comic, you don't ask, hey, do you think I'm funny? Because there's
Mm.
probably nothing that anyone could say
Mhm.
that would be supportive. Like, yeah, you're funny. Like, funny how, right? Or
Right,
funny,
right,
like,
right,
what do you
right.
mean?
Totally. Yeah.
So they just jump on stage and do
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting because I do think that like that is an important thing for people that are wanting to start a business to not just talk to their spouses because yes, do that. But also to realize that if you are entrepreneurial minded, like you are like you and me, right? Like, oh, there's an idea, we're just going to figure it out. We feel like the risk is low because we're going to be smart about the way we do it. And in our minds, we have exit plans if need be, or we're going to pivot and change it however we need. But not everybody has that sort of, is a lot of fear around business ownership. And so I think that is an important touch point, is to say like, okay, well, what is the risk that I'm willing to take? I mean, it might not feel risky emotionally for us, but like, is there financial risk, all of that? And yeah, I guess, yeah, I connect with this spouse.
No, you're not wrong. She's
Yeah,
totally right. I
yeah,
was completely in the wrong.
yeah,
Completely
yeah,
in the wrong.
yeah,
But I
no,
was too
but
dumb to realize it.
yeah, yeah.
Just,
Well,
or
yeah.
oblivious.
And maybe she could have gotten on board easily at that point if you explained what what risks you were willing to take with your family home and what ones you were not and all of that. But yeah, I that is a thing. That
Yeah,
is
you
a
know,
thing.
it's interesting because I like to ask that question of a lot of guests just to see, like, am I the only
Yeah.
one? So far, I believe I'm the only one that made
Okay.
that huge mistake. Hopefully, there's someone out there that can support me. Be like,
Yeah.
yeah, James, I
Yeah, they
messed
did
up
it
too.
too. Well,
But
you're still in entrepreneurship all these years later, so it worked
yeah,
out. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. We're doing all right. Yeah, we're approaching 20 years, I think,
Oh my gosh,
or
congratulations.
yeah, whatever, 18 so far. But
That's great.
it doesn't matter. It's fun.
Okay.
I don't know how I would even possibly go back, but I
Yeah. Well,
imagine it's
no,
just
I
like
would
you.
not
You got,
either. Yeah.
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 There's
Yeah.
always a new thing, whatever
Yeah.
that thing may be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the other things. You got these entrepreneurial women,
Yeah.
and they're supporting each other.
Yeah.
Is it remote? Is it in person? How do you work that?
So generally, so it has always been in person, and then COVID, obviously we went all
Yeah,
remote. And
right.
I
That
thought
shifted
there would,
stuff.
yeah, and I thought that I thought there would still be a big demand for the virtual groups because we've all gotten used to just hopping on Zoom and doing it, but all of them wanted to come back in person. So our networks that we meet every other month, and those are in person. And so I have it out there that I'm willing to do a virtual group, but everybody wants to be back in the same, there is something about being circled up in the same room together that's
Oh,
really,
totally,
yeah. So
totally.
but most of the mentorship that I do for new business owners or people that want to grow their business is done on Zoom. So yeah, that's done mostly remotely because we're all over the place, meet for an hour, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right. I
Yeah.
get it. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me, let's talk about the podcast production and all that jazz.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get into that game, and how do
Yeah.
you market that game?
Yeah. So one thing that's really cool about the way that my network is set up is that it's made up of all other business owners. And so we are all invested in getting the word out about our show, about each other's shows. We kind of rise together. Um, so from a marketing standpoint, we use Facebook and Instagram to promote. We put out a video clip for each episode, and we have a still graphic that we put out, and we also send those to each guest. And so we ask them to share that with their audience, and usually they want to, right? They're getting highlighted for whatever
You
they're
hope so, right?
Yeah, right. You hope so. And so our podcasts have different topics, but they're all within the personal and professional development lens. Or avenue. So that we have some similarities in our audiences between the shows, but some that are really different. And then also I am just beginning to really support other businesses that want to have podcasts for their own companies that aren't affiliated with my network, but I'm doing a lot of supporting and helping people launch, and then help to teach them to produce their own podcasts or producing them under my umbrella as well. So your first question was, how did that get started? What was your first question?
How did
How did
you
that
get into it?
Yeah. How to get into it? Yeah. So it was these entrepreneurs that are in my group that asked, we're just talking about wanting to start a podcast. And I don't know, I think I'm just the go-to person when somebody wants to try to figure something out. And so they were like, oh, maybe you could help me. And what do you think about this? I also should say I am a huge podcast nerd. Like
All right.
I listen to like 8 to 15 podcasts a day. I have my
A
morning
day.
a day. I'm a double speed or more kind of listener. I have my morning. I mean, I love, I know that sounds so weird to say, but I love
No, not on a
podcasts.
podcast. That is the best thing
So,
you could possibly
okay.
say on a podcast.
So that's where it started, is that like, I love podcasts almost. I mean, I'm constantly saying, oh, I heard on a podcast this and that. And I've just been a very heavy consumer of podcasts of all kinds, news, educational, entertainment, everything. I just love I'm a very busy person. And so I don't do a lot of like reading of books, even though I love to read, but I'm never still for that long. So the fact that I can like throw in a pair of headphones, put it on double speed, learn something or be entertained while I'm doing other things is really fits with me. So I think that's why they came to me, because they knew that I do listen to a lot of podcasts. Um, and then it was just a matter of figuring it out. Like, what are the steps? I knew nothing about audio production. I knew literally nothing about it, but like you were talking about, you just like full speed ahead. That's what
Yeah,
I
just do
did. I
it.
just like, okay, I'm going to learn everything. Like, okay, what happens first and then what happens next? And I thought, oh, I'll hire a lot of this out, but I actually ended up loving it. So then I learned it. And now I have people that are helping me on my team to execute all the production. But I love it. It's been so fun and so fulfilling. And it really it's changed my business. It's changed the host business. It's been really wonderful. It's been such a great opportunity to connect, both from what you and I are doing, like connect face to face and have a long form conversation with
Yeah,
someone that you didn't know and get to know them, and also connect with your target market, because they can kind of get to know you without having to set up a one-on-one with you. They can learn from you. It's been really, really wonderful.
right. So
Yeah.
when your I want to say clients essentially come to
Yeah.
you with podcast ideas,
Yeah.
are you the one that gives green light or not? Or you're just like, they want to do it, let's do it.
Yeah, no. So if I give a green light. So a lot of times I send them away for a few times and say, let's keep working on this idea. Either they can develop it on their own, or they can, hire me to help them really launch their podcast. We do a lot of work before even touching a microphone. That's what everybody wants to do, is just sit in front of the mic. But
Yeah,
we do a
right. Just hit
lot.
record. Nothing to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with business. People really want to start their website, and I have to slow them down and bring them back and start from the beginning of planning and build a really solid foundation. So, and then some shows are right for my network. Even really excellent shows sometimes are not right for the network, but I'll help, I can help them produce their show, launch and produce their show, and then they can operate it on their own. Or some shows fit the vibe of the network really well, and that I feel like round out a complementary space to what we're already doing. And so then, I would invite them to the show or the podcast network.
All right. Tell me, what is the network? Help me understand the nomenclature there.
Yeah. So a network the networks can do a lot of different things in the podcast world. They often help with deciding on the direction of the show. So working directly with the hosts and anybody on their team on a content, from a content background. monetarily, that there's, if a show has sponsors or affiliate links, that usually there's a profit share between the network and the podcast host. And so that's part of that picture. There's usually some like promotional agreements where, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. I'm going to share all of your episodes. You're going to put the podcast network logo on things, that kind of thing. So I didn't actually intend for the network to become its own like living, breathing thing, but it really has become its own living, breathing thing.
Ah,
And so so some networks offer different things. Some networks do all the editing. Some networks have a very heavy hand in deciding what the content is. Some are much more like a host site for it, but it's a really nice way for people to find other podcasts. The hosts can collaborate and be on each other's podcasts, borrow each other's audiences, grow their listenership in that way. And it's just like anytime you're working with someone who knows more about the bigger picture, that's sort of the benefit to working with, it's kind of like we were talking about with the kids yoga. Not everybody
right.
wants to run the business end of it. They just want to have the candy of teaching. It's similar for the podcast hosts.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So are every one of the podcasts on your network clients of yours in the other realm?
So that's how it started. But no, there's been people who have joined the network that weren't part of that just since, it's grown and the awareness is out there,
Gotcha. A
and,
little
so
independently.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
They usually know me from someone, it's
Okay.
word of mouth, or they're a listener of the pod. I have some people who have been listeners of the podcast or have been guests of the podcast,
Oh,
of one of and they said, oh, actually, that's how I've gotten several of my clients for podcast launch and development, both in the network and not on the network, is that they were guests on one of the network shows. They loved the process, they loved the systems, and they were like, okay, I've been thinking about starting a podcast for years. Can you finally help me do that? So the answer to that is
nice.
yes, I can.
All
So
right.
yeah.
So do you help the podcasters with marketing?
Yeah, so they are responsible for marketing on their channels, and then the network also does a promotion additionally. So we share some of the social media assets in our shared accounts and everything like that, and so we can both use things. We can tag each other. They are also marketing because they're marketing for their businesses. So, for example, we have a life and health coach. She does coaching. She does a lot of different things. She's a trainer. She's a public speaker. And so she is using her podcast for all of the things for her business. And so she's inherently motivated to use her podcast content to market for her businesses. That's the whole point of it.
Gotcha.
So she's putting that out there. It's content that she can share on her channels, and then we're also sharing it. So
Nice.
yeah.
So what would you consider to be, let's say, the top 5 mistakes that podcasters typically
Ooh.
make?
Okay, I already mentioned one. I'm gonna have to count on my hands here. The wanting to go straight to the mic and not putting time into the planning. This is just my opinion thing. I really like a clean cut edited show from listenerability. I am a snob about podcasts in that way. So now there are so many tools out there that can clean up podcasts with AI and everything like that. So that's another one. I think not utilizing guests. I think that even if you are a mostly solo show, I think it's really important to have guests on because, again, you can borrow their audience. They bring their expertise. It brings something different to their listeners. I realize there are some shows that are just strictly solo, and that's totally good, but that's what I like to see. I think you don't need a high end sound studio. There's so much equipment and software out there that can improve the sound quality, but not investing in a mic, I think, is a mistake that people make, that it's worthy investment. You sound a lot better when you have a nice mic. A fifth mistake, I think, not thinking about the branding. You want to be clear about what your podcast is going to be about, but not boring. You want to do it with a little bit of flair, but not making it so confusing and hard to understand that people don't know what your podcast is about. People need to remember that people are seeing your podcast in tiny format on the feed. And so making it just super clear, easy to understand what the podcast is about is the fifth
I love it.
piece of recommendation I have. So
I love it. That is super
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So Jamie, where can people find you?
Yeah. So my website is www.jamiegale.llc.com. From there, all my other websites are linked there. And I just started a central Instagram handle, which is also Jamie Gale LLC, because I had all the different Instagram handles for all my different brands. And I was like, I just need one central place to put everything. So you can reach out to me there, and my contact is all linked there. And yeah.
Dang, it sounds like you have so much going on. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak here because I feel like you got more going on than I do.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I love talking about this, and we were talking before that I'm not usually in the guest chair, and so this is a fun treat for me to be interviewed. So thank you for having me.
Happy to. Queen for a day, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly,
That is
exactly.
cool. Well, Jamie, I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And if you were, I'm just going to ask you really quick here about the
Yeah,
podcasting thing, because this is, I guess, since we're on a podcast,
yeah.
if you were to start a podcast or to help someone start a podcast, where would you suggest that people start to market it on day one? Or I should ask, let me add to that. Where would you recommend people market their podcast? And when would you suggest that they market their podcast? Before, during, or
Ooh,
after their first episode?
great question. I want to say the where everywhere. You don't want to hound your personal contacts on social media, but you can put a few posts out about it on your personal Facebook page, send an email to your contacts. The when, and then of course on your business accounts and all of that. The when, I like to have people create their trailer as their first episode. So like get their trailer published and use that to promote the episode, because to say, oh, I'm going to start a podcast, everybody's going to start a podcast, right? But when you have a link that you can send and be like, hey, I'm starting this podcast, here is a link to the trailer. If you could subscribe to the show, you'll know when the first episodes drop. That's usually a month or so before the first episodes drop by the time the production is ready. But that's what I see as the most successful, is having that link to a trailer to a first published episode that you can send. That's when you start shouting it from the rooftops.
That
Definitely.
is
Yeah.
cool. I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny that you said everybody's starting a podcast because I published my book and then I was trying to get people to read the book so that they
Ah,
could leave reviews. And they're like, I'm working on a book. And I'd be like, oh, that's super awesome. When's it coming out? Like,
someday. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
someday,
Yeah.
someday. When did you start on
Totally.
it? 20 years ago. Like,
Hmm.
oh,
Hmm.
it's so funny that you say that. So
Yeah.
funny because it's so true.
It's so true. Yeah. Yeah. So get that trailer recorded, produced, published, and then you can start telling everybody.
All right. And last question. I know we're running out of time here, so I appreciate you answering this
Yeah.
for me. We live in a world that's both video and audio.
Mm,
Podcast, generally speaking, we're leaning towards audio, but I'm feeling like video's coming in. Here we are.
yeah.
So when you have people doing podcasts, are the majority of them audio or
Yes.
are they audio and video?
So that's a great question. And our podcasts on the network and the ones that I help to produce, are the full episode is published in audio format, but then we do use video for promotion. So for little like 30 to 60-second clips, the recording platform that we use helps to create those. And so it records both, but the full episode we publish in audio only. And then we use the clips to promote, the video clips to promote on social media. It's a capacity decision. If you can do video the whole time, go for it. And your guests are down to be recorded, that's great. But if you're editing a podcast, obviously video editing is much more laborious than just audio only editing. And so since I'm mostly working with business owners that have their hands in a lot of other things, my recommendation is like, do what you have capacity for. And then, it's interesting because YouTube now you can import your audio only podcast. You don't need to have a video. And so that's what I recommend, is like seeing how your audio only link clicks are doing on YouTube. And if that is where people are finding you a lot, okay, well, that's a good nudge to add video. So yeah.
Nice. I love it. Jamie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumph and successes of business owners across the land. My name is James Cademan, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering and receptionist services for service businesses across the country on the web at callsoncall.com, as well as the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur in all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Jamie Gale, owner of Jamie Gale LLC. Jamie, I'm going to ask you for that website, but it's probably obvious. I don't know. Go ahead.
It's JamieGaleLLC.com. And then you can link to all my other websites, the Net Podcast Network, the Business Owning Group, Summer Camp, all of the things.
Awesome. And to clarify, it's JAMIE.
Yep. JAMIEGALE LLC.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.